So, welcome back to the Raising Our Vibration podcast, where we explore higher consciousness through spiritual practice. And today, Stephen and I are going to talk about unraveling IPFs to know who you are. So, what are IPFs? IPFs are implicit perceptual frameworks. So, what does that mean? Just sounds like some esoteric philosophical distinction. What it means is where you're coming from. It means the implicit subconscious framework through which, or point of view through which you have an experience. So it's your vantage point, right? But you're not aware of it. It's implicit, it's underneath the surface. So why is that important? It's important because when we perceive the world or perceive ourselves, perceive others, we just think that we are seeing or perceiving how things are. We don't realize that what we are perceiving is filtered through these implicit perceptual frameworks. These implicit perceptual frameworks. It's a mouthful. That's why we're going to call it IPFs, Stephen. We'll just call it IPFs so I don't have to say that too many times. So these IPFs have various different layers to them, right? So you have the layer of cultural interpretive frameworks, like say you're a Christian, you're going to look through a certain perceptual framework, or if you're an atheist, or if you're a Buddhist, or if you're a Republican or a Democrat in the US, or, there's all these cultural or familial perceptual frameworks. We have all these kind of inherited implicit perceptual frameworks that we look through, and they color what we experience. Then we also have the different vantage points from which we can look. And normally we're not aware of that until we do something like meditation, where we learn how to switch our perceptual vantage point. And as we learn to take on different vantage points, we realize, this way that I'm habitually perceiving life is just one possibility amongst many possibilities. Actually, I could perceive this same situation in any number of ways by adopting a different vantage point. And then another aspect of IPFs is that we could have an experience in the past, a state or an event in the past that really impacted us in such a way that it anchors a certain felt sense through which we approach the world. Like we could have a general sense of, say if we had a traumatic events in childhood, we could kind of have anchored a state of always being on the lookout to make sure everything's okay, right? To make sure we're safe, which is, of course, very understandable. But as we grow and we are not living in that situation where that state is anchored, that can limit us because we're still living from that history, right? That event is anchoring us in a state that is now coloring everything that we perceive now. So with that as an entry point, I know, Stephen, you've done some practical work with this on how to unravel these IPFs so that you arrive at a different vantage point. So you clear out these layers of IPFs and rest in a natural state of openness. So Stephen, I'll pass it over to you with that introduction.
Okay, Kevin, thank you so much, and love and blessings to everybody. And Kevin, when you were getting very excited about IPF, so was I, because I was thinking how rich and really valuable this particular chat is. Because when you consider shifting perspective, and fundamentally, what are we trying to shift perspective towards? And it really is just as you said, be open. Like if we were simply open and accepting or allowing or embracing of everything, then we'd be a little bit like a surfer on a wave. We would just simply be in harmony with the cosmos. We'd just surf the wave, right? It would be as simple as that. So in a sense, we're kind of trying to be like the surfer on the wave and just be open, to open our perspective. And that's where these IPFs, or these, the abilities to shift our internal states or our internal perspectives, become really important. And one of the practices I did notice that where this helped me a great deal was through lucid dreaming practice, because I discovered with a lot of interest that when I was in my very, mystical Christian days, that I tended to have a lot of, Christ's perspective, and I saw things through that lens. And I tended to dream that kind of, dreaming of Jesus and dreaming of Mary and all that kind of, that was really my predominant thought. And when I was working in Yogananda's practices, and when I had a lot of really beautiful experiences through, then it was very much that Hindu. I was experiencing the worlds that he described in and they, revealed themselves in dreams. And then the same with when I really got into dreaming yoga and sleep yoga practice with Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, I noticed my dreams shifted, and I thought, oh, well, that's curious. I'm actually going through a shift of different states. So as you're listening to this, no matter what perspective you come from, we're going to encourage you to shift a little bit, because Kevin pointed out so accurately that, in your past, and we really do create our identity around our past, right? For the majority of times, we've got all these stories that we've built up in the past. Oh, I've done this study, I've done this job, I've got this relationship, I've got this house, I've been here, I've done that. And they tend to, all those experiences, without us realizing it, they lodge in our internal perceptual framework, and they become part of how we view the world. And if you are, and you're anchoring them in a felt sense, right? I mean, this happens to all of us. You have a good experience and you naturally want to repeat it, and it's there, it's kind of lodged. And equally, if you have a very traumatic one, which you don't want to repeat, the shock of it can lodge itself in the body. So there's an anchoring of the felt sense, and what we tend to do through negative or positive experiences, and what we tend to do is hang on to them. And what we're trying to do here is to really soften and open these very subtle vantage points, right? These vantage points from which we tend to see the world. And it reminded me of a practice I did with Mingyur Rinpoche, called when you exchange yourself and for others. And when I did this practice with Kevin and all of you, a few weeks ago, and when you look at the basis of it, it's really beautiful how they describe it. So I remember when Mingyur Rinpoche was first pointing this out, he said, one of, this natural desire we have to want to soften these vantage points, because the vantage points can get quite hard and rigid, right? Without us even realizing it. We kind of get stuck on, oh, I'll view the war in Europe and this is the side I'm on. So because they're right? We tend to kind of, or this is the political party I support because they're right. Or this is what I think about the world because this is the right view to hold. So we tend to, without realizing it, we kind of have fairly rigid views towards things, even quite subtly. And Mingyur Rinpoche pointed out that when we learn to exchange ourselves for others, we actually, it's one of the most, beautiful, natural, and deeply human impulses we have. And that is just simply to open to experience itself. And in fact, you do it through exchanging with that experience with somebody else. So you put yourself in the place of a Ukrainian refugee, for example, as we suggested the other week, and then you put yourself in the place of a Russian soldier, and you kind of become a lot more open by shifting perspectives. And actually, subtly shifting your vantage point. And what happens is, and as Kevin, as you were describing, we're also encouraging you to do that in meditation, is not just to stay fixed on something, like I've got this fixed view of meditation and this is how it works and I've sorted it all out, right? Which is a very fixed mindset, but actually to start to experiment a little bit and soften and open and allow and start to learn about what is, more naturally present for you. So when you start to work with either, techniques or in meditation, or with your perspectives themselves, these vantage points, then you start to naturally unfold or unravel them. And so you start to really develop this kind of deep sensitivity and intuitive and intimate knowledge of everything that makes up what you've believed up till now as you. And that is your hopes, your fears, your dreams, your goals, all of that, and all the other bits in between. So what we're actually doing by shifting perspective, and in fact, by, just as we encourage in the light, love, and peace meditation, is to become more intimately aware of ourselves, simply in a way. So what we actually do is we start to soften and we loosen, and that naturally then begins to dissolve the barriers between ourselves and this world, right? Because when you've got a really hard identity, like this is me, then that's a pretty strong barrier to the world, right? Because you're really convinced that this is you and this is the way the world looks, and you're
defining yourself as a separate thing, right?
Exactly.
Right. And that's really the heart of it here, is to help to unravel that sense of self as some limited, defined thing, mostly described by cherry picking certain events in our history and identifying with them and saying, oh, well, that's me. That thing, maybe that's not me. I don't like to think of that as me, but that's me. And then that's me, and that's me, and that's me. And then I tell this story of me, which is really just an arbitrary picking of different moments and different feelings and identifying with them. We could go back and pick any moments, right? We could pick any states, any moments in time, any felt sensation that we have, and tell a story about it and tell a different story about it. And then does that mean we're a different self? Right.
Exactly. So and those stories actually potentially can, they don't always, but they can create barriers between ourselves and our world, because we're so convinced that our habitual patterns are the best ones, that we see somebody else with different habitual patterns or a different story, and that conflicts with our own, and we have all kinds of tension arise, because so the barrier, and when the tensions arise and the obstacles, they're actually just simply pointing out to you that you have got barriers between you and the world, because
when you find a story
you
about yourself, which is limited, it's focusing on something and repressing a lot of other things.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Which creates a barrier.
And so though when you start to allow or open to the possibility for other perceptions, other stories, even if you want to look at it that way, even other vantage points, then you start to recognize that, oh, these barriers are not quite as fixed and determined as I thought. This identity, this past and this future, and all these ideas and concepts are actually not as solid as I thought. And as you start to dissolve it, it's a little bit like, if you dissolve anything, if you simply start to soften, then there's the amazing thing, the miracle with just that simple softening, is there's a kind of warmth that arises. I mean, this is often it's a word, right, that's called compassion or love, but essentially it's a softening of these barriers. You just no longer have such a desire to push things away or to grab onto them. You just simply soften and allow what's present. So one of the experiments I did, and you can try this with me now, so it's a really simple experiment, and I'll just frame it for you first so you understand where to go with it. So I had one of my very fond experiences. So I'd like you to choose a positive experience, something that you've had in your lifetime that you've identified strongly with as a positive experience that involved you and somebody else, right? So my example was myself when I was a tiny tot, when my godmother, who was a Carmelite mother superior. Now I can remember, and I remember the fondness that I have towards her, right? So I want you to just pick something that was positive for you from your childhood, and I'll guide you into it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift perspective so that the actual perception you take, or the perspective you take, is actually of the other person towards you. So what I did last night, I did a meditation practice as if I was my godmother. And I actually I did both my meditation and my practices as if I was my Carmelite mother superior godmother. And I knew her well, and she wrote me many letters. They have this tremendous fun. So I just took that. If you're wondering, oh gosh, how do I kind of connect to the perspective of another person? So if you think of maybe the strongest felt sense that you have with that particular person. So the felt sense in my case was this fondness of prayer, because she taught me simply about this prayer. And I remember her, you remember, like think of it, a little tiny kid. I was only a couple of years old, and I've got this, she's kind of like a fairy godmother teaching me how to do this centering prayer. And she just simply set it up for me. She just said, "Are you're like a child of the Virgin Mary. So just imagine yourself held by this, by the Mother of Christ, and around you are these angels." Like that was kind of, and they're kind of, I sort of imagine these four angels kneeling around me, right? So that was the sense. Now, if I go to her perspective, then she's now the guide, right? So there was this guy, instead of me thinking of this fondness, I suddenly dropped into this perspective where it was like, oh, I can feel as that little child, but there's this guiding presence. So the perspective changed. It was subtle, but it changed it in a way that I hadn't really quite considered before. Like this, I considered all of her perspectives, the head of an order, because she was the head of a convent in Australia, her long tradition of Carmelite practice, her bringing all of that to this little wee fella that she decided to take under her wings, all of that. So it kind of shifted, and I thought, oh, it felt different. So what I'm wanting you to consider is, just as Kevin's been pointing out, is shifting your vantage point into somebody else's vantage point towards you in a really positive experience. So this could be a teacher, could be doesn't have to be a spiritual experience, could be a sports coach, could be anybody, somebody that you've kind of had that really deep connection with,
or even somebody, a figure you admire, right?
Right.
Like say Jesus,
Right.
or looking at you, right?
Yeah.
Or anyone that you would admire who looking at you with positive regard.
Yeah. Any of that would be absolutely perfect. Okay. So let's do this it's a very simple exercise, right? So I'm going to get you can close your eyes with me for a moment. And we're just going to go to these basic posture cues that we always do. It just helps settle you down when you relax. So I just want you to feel into first of all, this simple opportunity here that no matter what we experience, that we can experience an opening and a softening of the barriers that Kevin and I were speaking about. So there's this very beautiful softening that's happening. And it's a little childlike in its quality. It's very soft, very gentle. It's like this freshness and this openness. So you're just simply open to whatever might arise. And then you feel into the presence. Feel this softness and openness. Feel it moving down your body and into your feet. Feel like your feet are softening and opening to, just softening and opening to the presence of the earth beneath your feet. So there's a relationship here that you're softening and opening to. You're no longer the body. In fact, you're something, a much greater body, if you want to look at it that way. You're connected. You're an interconnected awareness. And feel that beautiful softening and opening flowing up your body and into your hands. Right? Your hands are resting in your lap, however they're rested. And just feel into that softening and opening there, a bit like cottony clouds. And then feel that flow coming up into this natural clarity in your spine. And so there's an opening and a softening in your spine. And you might feel like there's a string pulling you up to the ceiling. Just feel what it's like when you open to that too. Sometimes kind of, we hunch a lot in our lives and we're over computers, and see if you can just open your chest a bit and sit a little straighter. Something lovely that happens when we open and soften posture as well, to just open up. And so you're just sitting there in a very natural and peaceful way. And so I want you to open to the blessings of your pasts, just as Kevin and I were explaining. Just simply going back in time. You're just choosing a time in your life when you had a positive experience in a relationship with somebody else. So just as Kevin said, this could be a figure that you admire, like Jesus or Mary Magdalene or Buddha or Yeshe Sogyo, or it could be an ancestor, maybe a grandparent that you loved, or maybe your dad or your mum, perhaps a friend. You're just going back to that time. So first, I want you to really feel into this sense, this felt sense. Really, if you can see it, then make the images brighter. If you feel it, make the feelings stronger. Maybe you hear things, make the hearing clearer. Right, so just become aware of that sense, that felt sense.
I'm sensing a pet that just loved me.
So pet's a beautiful example, Kevin. So just like Kevin, whatever you're tuning into, really make that sense come alive. And then what I want you to do is just to simply exchange yourself. So you're going to take on the perspective, in Kevin's case, of the pet, and I'm taking on the perspective of my godmother. And if you tuned into Jesus, you might take on Jesus's perspective. What would it feel like to have a relationship with this wonderful person that you've called you, but from the perspective of this other person or this pet or this figure that you've admired? So what are the feelings? So Kevin might share some of the feelings he has from this once he tunes into it.
I just feel how happy this little puppy is to see me.
Yeah.
I didn't really have to do anything. It's just she was always just happy to see me.
Yeah, and for me,
wagging her tail.
Oh, I love that. I love that, Kevin. And for me, there was always the sense of just this mother superior who I know didn't have any children, and how she took on this little child. It's just this, she had a very, very caring. She not only cared for a convent, but she cared for this little boy. So there was just a wonderful as her, and just feel this opportunity to care deeply for a child that maybe I hadn't had before. I remember my mum did say that she just took it as the greatest gift to be able to care for a little child spiritually for the first few years of his life. So I'm really present with that kind of feeling. So just notice what comes up for you. What felt sense are you present to? This might be something totally new that you haven't considered before. So just really feel into that. Really allow this to anchor in you. And then whatever this felt sense is that's present, now see if you can, from either being the puppy or being the godmother or being Jesus or being whatever other perspective you've chosen, see if you can now just go through different aspects of your life and just watch yourself from this perspective. Just be aware. Be aware of the unfolding events of your life, but like a caretaker, but like with this kindness and this softening and allowing. It might actually just open you. You might even see certain events that may have been a little uncomfortable before, but now they're viewed with the happiness of the puppy or the caretaking of the godmother or the benevolence of Jesus or whatever perspective or vantage point you're taking. See if you can just watch your life unfold from that perspective. Just notice what softens. You might find at this point that certain aspects of your life completely change. Instead of shying away from some of the pain or struggles that you've had in your life, you might lean into it a little bit. Sort of like the happiness of the puppy or the caretaking of the godmother. You just kind of lean into it. Right, so I know there were some situations in my own life which I had some real difficulties at school. So I was bullied as a child, and what if I were to see that from that perspective, that caretaking perspective of the godmother? I might just have a much more naturally curious, even maternal approach to me, to the bully, to the world around me. Right? It's a bit like the love of a puppy for the planet. Right? Wouldn't that be remarkable if we could all have the love of a puppy for our fellow beings, or just as a mother would protect with her life her own children, and especially her only child. Maybe that's what would happen. We would cultivate this kind of boundless mind and heart toward all beings, and a kind of friendliness and kindness towards the entire world. There might be just a whole different felt sense. Right? Almost as if from the happiness of the puppy or the care of the godmother, that you'd gladly share that happiness with everybody, or you gladly take on the care of any child. Right? And so now just simply, again, feel into this presence, whatever this felt sense is, this happiness of the puppy, the care of the godmother, the benevolence of Jesus, or some other feeling, whatever the feeling is, whatever this fundamental, open, inviting approach to the world that's unfolding for you, whatever this beautiful expression is of your own fundamental generosity. Just see if you can feel again. And it's a way of anchoring it. Feel down into your feet with this perspective. Right, so so Kevin might be feeling into his feet with it. I mean, I can feel it even thinking about the happiness of the puppy. It makes my feet feel like they're going to get up and run around. and I might feel into my feet with the, the shift in perspective of the care of the guy. So now it feels like I'm taking this gentle care of my feet, right, which was a little different than how I perceived them before. Then bring that same happy or caring or kind, whatever it is, awareness into your hands. Then bring it back into the uprightness of your spine and your posture. And it's incredibly simple, isn't it? Because you're actually present, you're anchoring this beautiful felt sense of openness and connectedness. And this power to shift from what might have been a stuck place to this open connectedness that's beyond any box of right or wrong, or my side or your side. This shift, just like our shifts in meditation, takes us to a place that's beyond any concept. It's beyond bias. It's just this simple act of shifting our internal perspective has the power to actually immediately shift our experience, even with sticky parts of our life. It's really easy to do at any time during your day. You can just, now that you know this felt sense, you could just, if you find a time when you feel you're getting a bit stuck, then just go to the perspective of the puppy or the godmother or Jesus or whoever else you've connected with. And just rest in this open, connected, unbiased kindness and willingness to engage with anybody, anywhere, from this openness, from this allowing. So slowly open your eyes as this perspective for a few moments. Just feel what it's like to look into your eyes and others' eyes as you go about your day from that kindness and happiness and care of this shifted perspective, this different vantage point. And how wonderful it is to, you might feel like you are a child with this fresh perspective in life. It's so simple. And it's very, very open and caring. So Kevin, thank you for sharing that so beautifully. It was quite a lovely synchrony, Kevin, because I had just, as I was about to start talking about that, I thought, we didn't mention pets, connecting with, and then you did it so beautifully. It was like, you got that message.
Yeah, that just came through.
Yeah.
And it was very clear and very just completely a welcoming, appreciating, glad to see you energy. What if we brought that to everyone in every moment? That would that changes life.
That definitely changes life. I can feel it. It's such a strong felt sense that, as soon as, I was so glad you spoke to share that, because as soon as you said it, you can feel something beautiful in the energies, for anybody listening, for me too, there's something beautiful in the energies when we share, when we're so connected into that open shift and we share in that space, it's like, oh, I feel that puppy. I felt that sense of being that puppy. That was beautiful.
Oh, thank you, Stephen, for that beautiful practice. And thank you all for being here, for engaging with us, for practicing with us. And thank you for your practice. So if you'd like to have more information about practices like this, including our Raising Our Vibration community on Facebook, our OV meditation app, our book, courses, and so on, you can visit raisingourvibration.net, and we'd love to communicate with you there and have you join us and be part of our community of practice. So thank you, Stephen, and thank you all for being here today. Bye for now.